The Federation Council chamber was silent except for the hum of life support systems. 800 alien warships floated helplessly around the space station, their weapons useless and their crews in shock. The massive human battleship Retribution held position above them all. Its railguns still trained on strategic targets. Commander Inho stood in the center of his bridge, looking out at the alien fleet through the main view screen. His expression was calm but firm, like a teacher who had just finished giving a very important lesson to difficult students. "Admiral Vex Thara," he said over the communication channels. "Do you understand now why we came here?" The crystalline alien leader's form was flickering rapidly with stress patterns. Her voice shook when she replied. "Your weapons, they should not be possible. The energy requirements alone should tear your ship apart." History officer Min Young stepped forward to explain the background. She was a middle-aged woman with short gray hair and the patient manner of someone used to teaching complex subjects to unwilling students. "In our timeline, Commander, species very much like yours attacked Earth in the year 2157. They used the same arguments we heard in your council chamber, that kinetic weapons were primitive, that energy-based combat was the mark of advanced civilization." The alien commanders listened with growing horror as Min Young continued her explanation. "They destroyed our home planet and enslaved the survivors because they could not accept that human military doctrine was actually more effective than their advanced technology. Over 3 billion people died because of that arrogance." War Chief Drakmore's reptilian features twisted with discomfort. "But that was a different timeline. We have made no such attack on your world." Commander Inho nodded slowly. "Not yet. But your attitudes are identical. Your dismissal of kinetic weapons, your assumption that newer means better, your treatment of species who choose different technological paths, it all leads to the same place." Weapons Coordinator Chang Min had been monitoring alien communications throughout the demonstration. Now he reported his findings to the assembled fleets. "During the past hour, we intercepted over 200 messages between your ships discussing plans to attack human colonies after dealing with this single vessel. You were already planning to eliminate us as a potential threat." The accusation hung in the space between the fleets. Admiral Vexithara's crystal form dimmed as she realized the truth of the statement. The Federation had indeed been considering preemptive strikes against human space. General Korth's clicking grew rapid and defensive. "We were only responding to a perceived threat. Your weapons could destabilize the galactic balance of power." Captain Sung Ho of the Retribution's Marine Forces laughed bitterly. "There is the truth. You fear us not because we are primitive, but because we are effective. Your entire military doctrine becomes obsolete when faced with properly applied kinetic energy." Engineer So Young from the current timeline's human delegation had been studying the Retribution's technical specifications with amazement. Now she understood the true scope of human military evolution. "Captain Ji Young," she whispered, "look at these power consumption readings. They have solved every engineering problem that makes large-scale kinetic weapons impractical. Recoil absorption, targeting systems, ammunition manufacturing, everything." The demonstration had proven that humanity's primitive approach to warfare was actually the logical endpoint of military technology. While the aliens had focused on exotic energy weapons and esoteric defenses, humans had perfected the fundamental physics of combat: mass, velocity, and momentum transfer. Diplomatic attaché Unsu from the current timeline stepped forward to facilitate negotiations between the two versions of humanity and the alien leadership. She was a young woman with an earnest expression and the patient manner of someone trained in interspecies diplomacy. "Commander Inho," she said carefully, "what would it take for you to consider this situation resolved without further violence?" The commander from the alternate timeline considered her question for a long moment. Around him, his bridge crew continued their duties with quiet professionalism. These were people who had seen their world burn and had spent decades building the tools to prevent it from happening again. The aliens must acknowledge that every species has the right to choose their own military doctrine, he said finally. No species should be attacked or destroyed simply because their technology is different from the galactic norm. Admiral Vexthara's form flickered with reluctance. "But if every species develops kinetic weapons to your level, the balance of power will shift dramatically. Our current military systems will become obsolete. Captain Sung-ho smiled grimly. Now you begin to understand our perspective. How does it feel to face technological obsolescence? War Chief Drakmore hissed in frustration. What you ask would require us to completely restructure our military forces. The cost would be enormous, and the political consequences of refusing, Commander In-ho interrupted, will be far worse. We are not the only species that has been dismissed and threatened by your Federation. Many others have been watching this demonstration with great interest. Communications Officer Min Seo from the current timeline had been monitoring galactic communication networks during the confrontation. Now she reported her findings with excitement. Ambassador Hyunwoo, I am receiving messages from dozens of species throughout the galaxy. They are requesting technical specifications for kinetic weapon systems. Word of this demonstration is spreading faster than we can track. The implications were staggering. If multiple species began developing advanced kinetic weapons, the Federation's energy-based military superiority would collapse within a generation. General Korth's mandibles clicked rapidly with distress. This will destabilize everything. There will be arms races, territorial conflicts, the breakdown of established military doctrine. There will be balance, Commander In-ho corrected. When no single approach to warfare dominates all others, military conquest becomes much more difficult. Species will be forced to negotiate instead of simply overwhelming weaker neighbors with superior technology. The Retribution's massive guns began to retract into their armored housings. The demonstration was over, but the lesson would last forever. The alien fleets watched nervously as the human battleship's weapons disappeared from view. Ambassador Hyunwoo from the current timeline stepped forward to begin formal negotiations. He understood that this moment would define the future relationship between humanity and the galactic community. We propose the establishment of the Kepler Accords, he announced, a new framework for interspecies military cooperation based on mutual respect rather than technological hierarchy. The negotiations took place over the next several days. Representatives from every major species in the galaxy participated, either in person or through faster-than-light communications. The discussions were intense and sometimes heated, but the presence of the Retribution ensured that all parties remained respectful. Captain Hye-jin of the human frigate, Seoul's Pride, served as a liaison between the current timeline's diplomatic team and Commander In-ho's crew. She was amazed by the technological advances the alternate timeline had achieved. Your engineering solutions are incredible, she told Chief Engineer Jae-hun. The power systems alone represent a century of advancement beyond our current capabilities. Jae-hun smiled sadly. Progress born from necessity is often the most rapid. When your choice is evolve or die, you find ways to solve problems that seemed impossible before. The final Kepler Accords established several key principles that would govern future interspecies relations. No species would be attacked solely because of their technological choices. Military technology sharing would be encouraged rather than restricted. And most importantly, the value of different approaches to warfare would be acknowledged and respected. Admiral Vexithera signed the accords on behalf of the Helix Empire, her crystal form now stable and clear. We have learned a painful but necessary lesson about the dangers of technological arrogance. General Korth and War Chief Drakmore added their signatures, representing the Swarm Collective and Scaled Brotherhood respectively. The other major powers followed suit, creating a new framework for galactic civilization. As the formal ceremonies concluded, Commander In-ho prepared to return his ship to whatever dimension it had come from. But first, he had one final message for the assembled delegates. Remember this day not as a demonstration of human superiority, but as proof that there are many paths to military effectiveness. The species that survives longest is not the one with the most advanced technology, but the one that remains humble enough to learn from others. The Retribution began to fade from normal space-time, its hull becoming translucent as it shifted between dimensional barriers. But before it disappeared completely, Commander In-ho transmitted a final gift-complete technical specifications for basic, kinetic weapon systems, for any species that wishes to explore this technological path, his voice echoed across the communication channels. May you use these tools for defense rather than conquest. 6 months after the Kepler incident, the galaxy had changed dramatically. Species throughout the Federation began developing hybrid military systems, that combined energy weapons with kinetic systems. The alien bombardment had been going on for over an hour. Plasma cannons fired continuously, particle beams swept across the Retribution's hull, and quantum disruptors tried to tear apart the ship's molecular structure. The combined firepower of 800 alien warships focused on one target should have been enough to destroy anything in space. But the massive human battleship simply ignored it all. The UTS Retribution continued its steady approach toward the Federation station, as if the alien weapons were nothing more than annoying lights. Its thick armor absorbed energy that could have cracked moons, and its hull showed no damage at all. Commander Inho stood on the bridge of the Retribution, watching the alien attack with calm patience. He was a tall man with gray hair and deep scars on his hands, marks from battles fought long ago. His uniform was simple but perfectly pressed, and his voice carried the authority of someone who had commanded ships in real wars. "Weapons Officer Chang Wu," he said quietly. "Are our guests finished with their demonstration?" Chang Wu checked his instruments and nodded. "Yes, sir. Energy output from the alien fleet is dropping. Their weapons are overheating from sustained fire." Commander Inho activated the ship's communication system. His voice broadcast to every alien vessel in the fleet with perfect clarity. "Alien vessels, you have had your demonstration. Now observe ours." Admiral Vexithara felt her crystal form flicker with fear. The human ship had absorbed over an hour of concentrated bombardment without taking any damage. Whatever technology they possessed was far beyond anything in Federation records. "All ships cease fire and withdraw to defensive positions," she ordered. "We need to reassess the situation." But it was too late for retreat. The Retribution's main weapon ports were opening, revealing gun barrels that dwarfed anything the aliens had ever seen. Each rail system was over a kilometer long and wide enough for a small spacecraft to fly through. The magnetic coils that lined the barrels glowed with contained energy that made the space around them bend and shimmer. Gunnery. Chief Seung-Wan coordinated the firing sequence from the weapon control center deep inside the ship. He had been born and raised in space, trained from childhood to operate the massive kinetic systems that were humanity's answer to energy-based warfare. "First salvo loaded and ready, Commander," he reported. Tungsten penetrators, each weighing 12 tons. Acceleration to 25% light speed. Commander Inho nodded approvingly. "Fire when ready, Chief. Target the empty space between grid coordinates 77 and 88. Full power demonstration." The first shot fired with a sound that no human ear could hear but every human soul could feel. The tungsten penetrator accelerated down the kilometer-long rail system, gaining speed until it reached a significant fraction of light speed. The kinetic energy contained in that single projectile was greater than most antimatter warheads. The round struck empty space 50,000 kilometers away from the nearest alien ship. The impact created a brief flash of light as the projectile's kinetic energy was converted to heat and radiation. But what terrified the alien observers was not what they could see. It was what their instruments told them about the energy transfer. Admiral Vexithara stared at her sensor readings in disbelief. "The kinetic energy reading? It cannot be correct. No conventional weapon should be able to generate such force." Tactical Officer Kyung-soo aboard the Retribution explained over open communication channels. "Your shields are designed to deflect energy by dispersing it or redirecting it away from your ships. But kinetic energy follows Newton's laws of motion. When an object in motion meets an object at rest, the energy must go somewhere. Your deflection systems cannot redirect mass." Several alien ships near the projectile's path reported shield failures from the kinetic shockwave alone. The tungsten round had not even hit them, but the space distortion from its passage was enough to overload their defensive systems. General Korth clicked his mandibles frantically as he tried to understand what had happened. "How is such acceleration possible? The magnetic fields required would tear apart any normal spacecraft." Chief Engineer Jae-hun provided the technical explanation. "Our ship is built around the weapons, not the other way around. Every system is designed to support the railguns. We sacrifice speed and maneuverability for the ability to throw metal projectiles at relativistic velocities." War Chief Drakmore was studying the human ship's design with growing horror. His reptilian eyes could see the truth that the other alien commanders were still trying to deny. The Retribution was not a normal spacecraft with weapons attached. It was a weapon platform with just enough spacecraft around it to keep the guns operational in space. "Look at the hull. Structure," he hissed to his bridge crew. "The entire ship is built to absorb recoil from those massive weapons. They have created a vessel whose only purpose is to deliver kinetic energy to targets." Commander Inho announced the second demonstration. "The next salvo will target derelict vessels in the outer system. These are your own ships, abandoned but still structurally sound. Observe how kinetic energy interacts with advanced alien technology." The targets were a group of old Helix Empire cruisers floating near the system's asteroid belt. They had been decommissioned years ago but were still equipped with the same quantum shields and exotic armor used by current Federation warships. Gunnery Chief Sung Wan made the technical announcement. "Single projectile, reduced power, impact velocity 20% light speed. Targeting lead vessel, the shot fired. The tungsten penetrator crossed the distance in seconds and struck the derelict cruiser dead center. The result was devastating and educational. The quantum shields that should have deflected the impact simply collapsed. The exotic armor that should have dispersed the energy was punched through like paper. The kinetic force transferred through the entire ship, breaking its structural framework and causing it to literally fall apart in space. The secondary impacts were almost as impressive. Debris from the destroyed cruiser struck the other derelict ships at high velocity, damaging them severely. The aliens watched their own advanced technology being destroyed by simple metal projectiles and basic physics. Captain Sung Ho of the Retribution's Marine Complement explained the demonstration over the communication channels. Energy weapons work by adding heat or radiation to a target until it fails. Kinetic weapons work by transferring momentum from the projectile to the target. Your defenses are designed for the first type of attack, not the second. The alien fleet commanders were beginning to understand the scope of their miscalculation. Every defensive system they possessed was optimized for energy-based combat. They had no effective defense against solid objects moving at relativistic speeds. Admiral Vexithara made a desperate attempt to negotiate. "Commander Inho, we acknowledge your superior firepower. What are your terms for ending this demonstration?" The human commander's response was immediate and non-negotiable. "This is not a negotiation. This is an education. You will observe the complete demonstration so that you understand exactly what you have been dismissing as primitive technology." General Korth attempted to flee with the remainder of his bioship swarm. The living vessels began accelerating away from the station, their organic engines pushing them to maximum velocity. But they had barely begun their escape when Gunnery Chief Sung Won's voice filled the communication channels. "Bioships attempting to flee, you are now entering our point defense engagement zone. For your safety, please reduce velocity and return to formation." When the bioships continued their escape attempt, the Retribution's point defense systems came online. Hundreds of smaller railguns mounted across the ship's hull began tracking the fleeing vessels with perfect precision. The point defense demonstration was as impressive as the main guns. Each bioship was hit by multiple projectiles that had been precisely calculated to disable, rather than destroy. The living vessels' organic hulls could not heal from kinetic trauma. Their biological systems were designed to repair energy damage, not physical wounds. Within minutes, the entire bioship swarm was floating helplessly in space, their engines destroyed and their crews unharmed but completely unable to maneuver. Navigator Su Jin had been plotting courses that demonstrated the Retribution's surprising agility. Despite its massive size, the ship moved with deadly precision, always maintaining optimal firing positions while the alien fleet struggled to coordinate their attacks. The human ship maneuvers like a predator, War Chief Drakmore observed with grudging respect. Every movement is calculated to maximize their advantage and minimize ours. Weapons Coordinator Chang Min provided additional technical details. Our ammunition is manufactured continuously during combat. Raw materials are processed into tungsten penetrators by automated systems throughout the ship. As long as we have metal to work with, we can maintain fire indefinitely. The implications were staggering. The alien fleets carried limited ammunition for their energy weapons. Exotic matter was expensive and difficult to produce. But the human ship could literally turn space debris into projectiles. Commander Inho made his final demonstration announcement. The education phase of this encounter is now complete. You have observed how kinetic energy interacts with your defenses. You have seen how The massive human battleship dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Kepler 442 system. Its arrival sent shockwaves through every sensor array on the Federation station. The alien commanders had never seen anything like it. Senior analyst Wu Jin from the Human Science Division was the first to understand what they were looking at. His hands shook as he reviewed the detailed sensor readings on his workstation. The ship's hull showed patterns he recognized from Earth's naval history: overlapping armor plates, redundant structural supports, and weapon ports designed for physical projectiles rather than energy beams. "This is impossible," he muttered to himself. "It looks like they took an old Earth battleship design and scaled it up 1,000 times." Admiral Vexithera stood at the main tactical display, her crystal form flickering with confusion and fear. The approaching vessel defied everything she understood about advanced starship design. Its hull was made of simple metal alloys: titanium, steel, and ceramic composites. No energy shielding, no quantum field generators, no exotic matter technology at all. "How can something so primitive block our deep space scans?" she demanded. "Our sensors should be able to see through basic metal like it was transparent." Lieutenant Commander Dong Hyun, a former officer in Earth's Space Navy, studied the ship's configuration with growing recognition. He had spent years aboard human warships before joining the diplomatic service. The design philosophy was unmistakable: layers of thick armor, multiple backup systems, and weapons built to throw massive amounts of metal at the enemy. "Captain Ji Young," he said quietly, "that ship was built by someone who understands naval warfare. Real naval warfare. Not these energy beam duels the aliens prefer. Look at those gun turrets. They are designed for sustained bombardment." Dr. Young-hee, the human delegation specialist in alien communications, was analyzing the ship's transmission patterns. Something about the signal structure seemed familiar but wrong at the same time. The protocols were definitely human in origin, but they had evolved beyond anything in current Earth databases. "The communication system is definitely ours," she reported, "but it is more advanced than anything we have ever built. The data compression is incredible, and the encryption is completely unbreakable." General Korth's insect-like sensors were working frantically to analyze the approaching vessel. His forearms moved rapidly over his control panels as he tried to understand what his biotechnology was telling him. The readings made no sense at all. "The life sign readings are impossible," he clicked nervously. "The ship shows nearly 10,000 human crew members. But no human vessel has ever carried more than a few hundred people. The life support systems alone would be larger than most of your ships." The alien fleets began moving into defensive positions around the space station. Energy weapons charged to full power, quantum shields activated to maximum strength, and exotic matter warheads prepared for launch. Every major military power in the galaxy was represented in the combined fleet. Over 800 warships armed with the most advanced technology available. War Chief Drakmore took command of the defensive formations. His reptilian features were twisted with determination as he coordinated the alien response. "All ships maintain firing positions. If this vessel is responsible for our recent defeats, we will show them the true power of united galactic forces." The human battleship continued its steady approach, completely ignoring the massive alien fleet surrounding it. When it reached communication range, a clear message broadcast on all frequencies in perfect galactic standard. "This is UTS Retribution, representing the United Terran Systems. We are here to discuss your recent statements about primitive human military capabilities." Captain Hai Jin of the human escort frigate Soul's Pride was monitoring the communications from her small ship. Her face went pale as she recognized the ship classification. UTS, United Terran Systems, had not existed in any official human records for decades. The organization had been dissolved after the failed Mars colony wars in the 2080s. "Ambassador Hyun Woo," she reported over secure channels. "UTS was shut down over 40 years ago. Either someone has been building ships in secret for decades, or this vessel is from somewhere else entirely." The alien fleet commanders were losing patience. Admiral Vexithara activated the station's main communication array and broadcast a challenge to the approaching vessel. "Unknown human ship, you are approaching a restricted military zone. Identify your authorization and submit to Galactic Federation inspection immediately." The response came back within seconds, spoken by a voice that carried absolute authority. "Negative. We are not subject to Federation jurisdiction." Maintain your current positions and prepare to receive a demonstration of actual military capability. War Chief Drakmore's reptilian features twisted with rage. Arrogant humans. You think your single ship can threaten our combined fleet? We have 800 vessels armed with the most advanced weapons in the galaxy. The human battleship's response was calm and matter-of-fact. We are aware of your numbers. Please observe the following demonstration before taking any hostile action. Suddenly, every alien ship in the fleet opened fire at once. The space around the human battleship filled with deadly energy. Plasma cannons, particle beams, quantum disruptors, and exotic matter warheads all converging on the massive vessel. The bombardment was incredible. Enough concentrated firepower to destroy a small moon struck the Retribution's hull. The energy discharge lit up the entire star system like a miniature sun. Any normal spacecraft would have been vaporized instantly. But when the light faded, the human battleship was still there. Its hull showed no damage at all. The massive vessel had not even slowed down or changed course. It continued its steady approach as if the alien attack had never happened. Admiral Vexithera stared at her sensor readings in disbelief. Impossible. That was enough energy to crack a planet's crust. How is that ship still intact? The answer came over the communication channels in the same calm voice. Your energy weapons are designed to overwhelm shields and armor by transferring heat and radiation. Our hull is designed to absorb and disperse kinetic energy. Heat dissipates. Kinetic energy transfers. General Korth's clicking grew rapid and panicked. All ships concentrate fire on specific sections. Focus all beams on their weapon ports. If we cannot destroy the hull, we will disable their offensive capability. The alien fleet adjusted their attack, pouring concentrated energy into the Retribution's gun turrets. For nearly an hour, they maintained constant bombardment. Plasma that could melt asteroids, particle beams that could tear apart molecular bonds, and quantum fields that could disrupt matter itself, all focused on specific points of the human ship. The Retribution absorbed it all without effect. Finally, a new voice came over the communications, older, more experienced, with the tone of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. Alien vessels, you have had your demonstration. Now observe ours. Commander Inho of the UTS Retribution had taken personal command of the communication channels. His voice carried the weight of authority earned through countless battles. You have spent the last hour proving that your energy weapons cannot penetrate proper armor. Now we will show you what happens when physics meets wishful thinking. The Retribution's weapon ports began to open. What the aliens saw made them gasp in shock and terror. The gun barrels that emerged from the ship's hull were enormous, each one over a kilometer long and wide enough to fly a small spacecraft through. They were clearly magnetic rail systems, designed to accelerate solid projectiles to incredible speeds. Gunnery Chief Sung-Wan coordinated the firing sequence from the ship's weapon control center. His voice was calm and professional as he announced the demonstration. First salvo will target empty space to demonstrate projectile velocity and energy transfer. All alien vessels maintain minimum safe distance of 50,000 kilometers. The first shot fired. The tungsten penetrator that emerged from the Retribution's main gun was massive. Several tons of dense metal accelerated down a kilometer-long magnetic rail. The projectile reached 25% of light speed in less than 2 seconds. The kinetic energy reading made every alien scientist in the fleet check their instruments twice. The round struck empty space 50,000 kilometers away from the nearest ship. The kinetic shockwave from its passage was so intense that several alien vessels had their shields collapse just from being too close to its trajectory. Admiral Vexthara watched her flagship's defensive systems overload from the proximity blast. The kinetic energy transfer. It is off our measurement scales. How is such acceleration possible? Tactical Officer Kyung-soo aboard the Retribution provided the answer over open channels. Your shields are designed to deflect energy. Mass times velocity squared does not care about your deflection matrices. Kinetic energy follows different rules than the energy weapons you are familiar with. The second demonstration targeted a group of derelict ships floating in the system's outer asteroid belt. These were old Helix Empire vessels, identical to the most advanced ships in the current alien fleet. They had been abandoned years ago but were still structurally sound. Gunnery Chief Seung-Wan announced the parameters. Single projectile, half power. 3 days had passed since the first reports from Epsilon Centauri. The Galactic Federation Council chamber was in chaos. Emergency lights flashed red and alien voices filled the air with panic and confusion. What had started as impossible reports had become a terrible reality. Admiral Vexithera stood at the central display, her crystal body flickering with stress patterns. The holographic screen showed the aftermath of the battle at Epsilon Centauri, where once 300 Helix warships had patrolled the system. Now only twisted metal debris floated in space. "Every single ship," she whispered, her voice barely audible, "destroyed or disabled. Over 50,000 crew members lost." The battle recordings played on repeat. The alien commanders watched in stunned silence as their most advanced vessels were torn apart by simple metal projectiles. The attackers had used massive railgun rounds that moved at incredible speed, nearly 15% of light speed. War Chief Drakmor pounded his scaled fist against the podium. "This cannot be real," he growled. "Our intelligence networks monitor every species in the galaxy. None of them possess such firepower. These projectiles, the energy readings are impossible for primitive technology." General Korth's forearms gestured wildly as he studied the tactical data. His insect-like eyes darted between different displays, trying to understand what had happened. "The velocity calculations make no sense," he clicked rapidly. "To accelerate solid matter to such speeds would require energy output greater than a small star." Near the back of the chamber, the human delegation watched quietly. Engineer So Young, a brilliant young woman with thick glasses, studied the battle footage on her tablet. She was part of the technical staff, usually ignored by the alien leaders. But now she was seeing something that made her heart race with recognition. "Captain Ji Young," she whispered urgently, "look at these impact patterns." The attacking ships concentrated all their mass and velocity into single points. They did not spread their energy like plasma weapons do. Captain Ji Young leaned over to look at So Young's calculations. The young engineer had overlaid the enemy attack vectors with standard energy weapon defense matrices. The pattern was clear. The alien shields were designed to deflect energy attacks, not physical objects moving at relativistic speeds. Ambassador Hyunwoo raised his hand to speak. The aliens, desperate for any explanation, actually listened this time instead of laughing. "May I examine the complete battle data?" he asked politely. "Perhaps a fresh perspective might help." Admiral Vexthera's crystal form shimmered with reluctance, but she nodded. "Very well, Ambassador. Though I doubt your limited technology can analyze what our best scientists cannot understand." Captain Tae Min, Ji Young's tactical advisor, began downloading the alien battle logs to his portable computer. He was a quiet man who had served in Earth's Space Navy before joining the diplomatic corps. As the data flowed across his screen, his expression grew more and more troubled. The attacking fleet had appeared without warning at the edge of the Epsilon Centauri system. Their ships were massive but moved with surprising grace. When the Helix defenders challenged them, the attackers had responded with a brief message in corrupted galactic standard before opening fire. Communications officer Min Seo had been monitoring alien transmissions for the past 3 days. She was fluent in 17 galactic languages and could recognize speech patterns from dozens more, but something about the intercepted enemy communications bothered her. "Ambassador," she said quietly, "I have been analyzing the enemy radio chatter. Most of it is too damaged to understand, but some phrases sound almost familiar." She played a cleaned-up audio file through her tablet. The words were distorted and spoken with a strange accent, but underneath the corruption, the structure sounded almost human. "Targeting solution confirmed. Main battery ready. Fire for effect." The alien leaders were too focused on their technical discussions to notice the human-side conversation. But Ambassador Hyunwoo felt a chill run down his spine as he listened to the recording. Meanwhile, new reports were coming in from across the galaxy. General Korth received an urgent message from his home fleets in the Tau Ceti system. His bioships, living vessels that could heal damage and adapt to enemy weapons, were under attack by the same mysterious force. "Impossible," Korth clicked in distress. "Our bioships have self-healing capabilities. They can regenerate from almost any damage. But these reports, the projectiles punched completely through them. The organic hulls cannot heal from such massive kinetic trauma." The recordings from Tau Ceti showed the same pattern, massive solid projectiles moving at incredible speed, smashing through the living ships like they were made of paper. The biovessels tried to adapt their defenses, but there was nothing to adapt to. just pure kinetic energy delivered with perfect accuracy. War Chief Drakmor was reviewing similar reports from Scaled Brotherhood territory. His plasma-armed fleets had tried to intercept the enemy projectiles with their energy weapons, but the metal rounds were too small and too fast. By the time the targeting systems could lock on, the projectiles had already hit their targets. 3 of our major fleets have been eliminated, he hissed in frustration. The enemy ships appear, destroy everything in their path, then disappear before reinforcements can arrive. They are using hit-and-run tactics with weapons that should not be able to penetrate modern defenses. Admiral Vex Thura studied the combined battle reports from all 3 species. The pattern was becoming clear, and it terrified her. The unknown enemy had specifically targeted their most advanced military installations. They seemed to know exactly where to hit and how to maximize damage with their primitive weapons. There is intelligence behind these attacks, she announced to the chamber. This is not random raiding. Someone has studied our defenses and found their weaknesses. Engineer So Young had been working quietly at her tablet, running calculations that the alien computers had missed. She finally looked up with an expression of understanding and fear. Captain, she whispered to Ji Young, I know why their shields failed. Energy barriers work by deflecting or absorbing incoming force, but these projectiles had so much kinetic energy that the shields could not handle the transfer. It would be like trying to stop a speeding train with a fishing net. The implications were staggering. Every major military power in the galaxy used energy-based defenses. If someone had developed kinetic weapons powerful enough to overwhelm those defenses, then every fleet and fortress was vulnerable. Suddenly, the chamber's main display flashed with an urgent alert. Long-range sensors had detected a massive energy signature at the edge of the Kepler 442 system. Something big was approaching at sublight speed. The alien leaders rushed to their sensor stations, desperate for information about this new arrival. What they saw made them gasp in shock and confusion. The approaching vessel was enormous, nearly 8 kilometers long and 2 kilometers wide. But its energy signature was all wrong. Instead of the exotic matter cores used by advanced civilizations, it showed fusion reactors. Instead of quantum field generators, it had massive rotating sections for artificial gravity. Most disturbing of all, the hull composition readings showed simple metals and ceramics. No energy shielding, no exotic materials, no quantum armor, just thick layers of primitive alloys arranged in a pattern that reminded human observers of ancient Earth battleships. War Chief Drakmor's voice was barely a whisper. What kind of civilization builds ships like this? It looks like something from our prehistoric age, but scaled up to impossible size. The mystery vessel continued its approach, broadcasting a simple message in multiple galactic languages. The translation scrolled across the main display in bold letters. Prepare for inspection of military capabilities. Do not attempt to interfere. Admiral Vexithara's crystal form was flickering rapidly with stress patterns. All defensive fleets take positions around the station. Charge all weapons and raise maximum shields. If this vessel is responsible for our recent losses, we must be ready to defend ourselves. But Captain Tae-min was staring at his portable computer with growing recognition. The approaching ship's design specifications were appearing on his screen, and something about them seemed familiar. Very familiar, Ambassador, he said in a voice barely above a whisper. I think we need to prepare for something that should not be possible. Ambassador Hyunwoo looked at his tactical advisor with concern. What do you mean? Taemin turned his screen so the ambassador could see. The ship's classification code was displayed clearly. UTS Retribution, United Terran Systems, sir. Taemin said quietly. That ship is human, but UTS hasn't existed for decades and we have never built anything like this. As the massive vessel continued its steady approach toward the station, the alien fleets prepared for battle against an enemy they did not understand. And in the human delegation section, Ambassador Hyun-woo realized that someone was about to teach the galaxy a very painful lesson about the value of primitive weapons. The massive space station floated in the darkness above Kepler 442b. Inside its central chamber, hundreds of alien beings gathered for their monthly meeting. The room buzzed with strange voices speaking in dozens of different languages. This was the Galactic Federation Council, where the most powerful species in the galaxy came to show off their strength. Admiral Vexithara stood at the center podium. Her body looked like living crystal, clear and shining under the bright lights. She raised one arm and the room went quiet. Her voice was cold and sharp when she spoke. "Fellow warriors of the galaxy," she began. "Today I will tell you about our latest victory over the Outer Rim rebels." She waved her hand, and a large screen appeared in the air above her. It showed space battles with bright flashing lights and exploding ships. "Look how easily our energy shields stopped their primitive weapons," she said with pride. "They threw metal bullets at us like ancient savages. Our quantum shields made their attacks bounce off like raindrops." The aliens in the audience made sounds of approval. General Korth clicked his sharp teeth together. He was tall and thin like a giant insect, with 4 arms and black eyes. His voice sounded like scraping metal when he spoke. "The Swarm Collective also faced such backward enemies last month," he said. "They used chemical explosives against our bioships. How foolish. Our living vessels simply ate their missiles and grew stronger." War Chief Drakmor hissed his agreement. His skin was covered in green scales and old battle scars ran across his face and arms. "My plasma cannons melted their steel ships like ice in fire," he growled. "These primitive species still think solid metal can protect them. They have learned nothing about modern warfare." The 3 leaders looked around the room with satisfaction. Other alien commanders nodded and made sounds of agreement. They all shared the same belief, that energy weapons, plasma beams, and quantum technology were the only proper way to fight wars in space. In a small section near the back of the room, Ambassador Hunwoo sat quietly. He was a human man in his 50s, with gray hair at his temples and deep lines around his eyes. His simple blue uniform looked plain next to the fancy armor and robes worn by the alien leaders. Next to him sat Captain Ji Young, a human woman with sharp eyes and short black hair. She wrote notes on a basic tablet computer. Most of the aliens barely noticed the 2 humans. Earth had only learned to travel faster than light 50 years ago. In galactic terms, humans were still babies. Their technology was considered old and weak compared to what the great alien empires had built. Admiral Vexthera continued her speech. "These backward species refuse to accept that warfare has evolved beyond their crude methods. They cling to their metal projectiles and chemical bombs like children with broken toys. They do not understand that true military power comes from mastering energy itself." She pointed to the battle footage again. "Watch how our particle beams cut through their armor. See how our quantum disruptors tear apart their molecular bonds. This is the future of combat. Clean, precise, and absolutely deadly." General Korth stood up, his 4 arms gesturing wildly. "The General speaks truth," he clicked. "The Swarm has conquered 47 star systems using biotechnology. Our living weapons adapt and evolve during battle. No static defense can stand against us. These species that still use gunpowder and metal slugs are relics of a more primitive age." War Chief Drakmor slammed his clawed fist on his chair's armrest. "In my homeworld's ancient history, we too used such simple weapons. Swords, spears, chemical firearms, tools for the weak and unimaginative. Only when we discovered plasma technology did we become true warriors." The alien audience laughed and cheered. Many species had similar stories. They had all moved beyond kinetic weapons long ago. Energy-based combat was seen as the mark of an advanced civilization. Using physical projectiles was considered embarrassing and primitive. Ambassador Hyunwoo finally raised his hand to speak. The room gradually fell silent, though some aliens continued to whisper among themselves. His voice was calm and steady when he addressed the assembly. "With respect, Admiral Vexthera," he said, "perhaps there is wisdom in not dismissing proven methods too quickly. Throughout history, the most effective solutions are often the simplest ones." For a moment, complete silence filled the chamber. Then the aliens burst into laughter. The sound was strange and unsettling, clicking from the insect-like species, hissing from the reptilians, and musical chiming from the crystalline beings. General Korth's clicking grew faster and higher pitched. "Did everyone hear that?" he said between fits of laughter. "The human thinks their ancient weapons have value in modern warfare. How wonderfully naive." War Chief Drakmor wiped tears from his large yellow eyes. "Next they will tell us that their wooden clubs and stone axes are superior to our plasma rifles," he wheezed. Admiral Vexithara held up her hand for silence, though she was still shimmering with amusement. "Ambassador Hyunwoo," she said in a patronizing tone, "your species is young and inexperienced. In time you will learn to abandon these primitive concepts. The universe has moved beyond the age of throwing rocks at each other." Captain Ji Young looked at her ambassador with concern. She could see anger building behind his calm expression, but Hyunwoo kept his voice level. "I understand your position," he replied, "but sometimes old methods survive because they work, not because we are too stupid to find better ones." This brought another wave of alien laughter. Several species began sharing their own stories of encountering primitive civilizations that still used kinetic weapons. They described these encounters like adult warriors fighting against armed children. Suddenly, a communication officer near the front of the room stood up urgently. Her 6 arms were working frantically over a control panel, and her antenna-like sensors were twitching with alarm. "Admiral Vexithara," she called out in a shaking voice. "Emergency transmission from Epsilon Centauri system. The border fortress is under attack." The laughter died instantly. Epsilon Centauri was the Helix Empire's most heavily fortified system. It was protected by over 300 of their most advanced warships and surrounded by defensive stations armed with the latest quantum technology. Admiral Vexithara's crystal form flickered with sudden concern. "What type of attack?" she demanded. "Which enemy fleet has dared to challenge us there?" The communication officer worked at her controls for several seconds before looking up with confusion. "The reports are strange, Admiral. The attacking force appears to be using kinetic weapons. Solid projectiles fired at extremely high velocity." The chamber fell completely silent. General Korth stopped clicking his teeth. War Chief Drakmore's eyes went wide. Even the smaller alien species stopped their constant chittering and humming. Admiral Vexithara's voice was sharp with disbelief. "That is impossible. No kinetic weapon could penetrate our quantum shields. The physics simply do not work that way." But even as she spoke, more urgent messages began flooding in from the Epsilon Centauri system. The fortress was calling for immediate reinforcements. Their shields were failing. Ships were being destroyed by massive projectile impacts. Ambassador Hyunwoo and Captain Ji Young exchanged a meaningful look. Something very strange was happening in Helix space, and it involved the exact type of weapons the aliens had been mocking just moments before.